itself, but the fact that the entire notion of an earmark pollutes the entire process, and that's what we need to correct.
Right, exactly. Well, and the other thing about earmarks too is I've had good, solid constitutional conservatives tell me, well, if we eliminate earmarks, then all that does is put the power to spend that money in the hands of the executive. Then the president will decide where that money goes. And the whole point is, no, the federal government doesn't need to be taking that money out of our pockets to begin with. That's how you solve it.
Exactly. Congress controls the purse. And all Congress has to do is exert that authority to control the purse. I mean, you could see a good example is the debt ceiling. All Congress had to do if it wanted to is said, we just won't do it. We're not going to touch the debt ceiling, spend what you have, and sit on it until the next election. Congress could have done that. Of course, you might have had Geithner play with the Constitution to try to get around that, but the point is the Congress has the purse strings, and the president doesn't have a way of averting that. And that's this whole notion that we only have one-third of the government. Well, if you can only get one of the three branches, I'll take Congress any day. That's the one that where the spending bills originate, and that's the one that really has the authority, if it wants to step up and control what goes on.
Right, exactly, and that's the whole point. That's why I got so ticked off when I heard Boehner talking about, well, we only control one-third of the three branches of government. And no, you control the House of Representatives. That's where the spending and taxing bills originate. And because you hold the purse strings, you can open the purse or you can cinch the thing shut and dare somebody to try to change that. They can't without controlling the House.
Yeah, that's true. I had a lot of people talk to me just on the street and blogs, emails. What about this notion of compromise? Don't we really have to compromise at the because we may have our ideas, but some Republicans may not agree with us, and of course the left doesn't agree with us. And my response to that is, yeah, we can compromise. I understand the need for compromise, but the compromise needs to be better than doing nothing. And in many instances, regardless of what you're talking about from a government standpoint, doing nothing, no action, is usually not the worst alternative. So what we do has to be better than doing nothing. And in this case, in terms of raising the debt limit, I am undecided whether this was actually any better than just simply doing nothing and letting the whole thing ride. I think it's a lesser of evils, and I think both were evil. I don't fault those Tea Partiers or conservatives that held their breath and voted for this. I think you can debate it on different ways, but I think it is true that we don't, until we get the White House, we're not going to be able to get much done. But we have to be able to flex the muscle we have. We instead of just saying, well, we don't have all three branches, so here, we're going to give the liberals half of what they want. That's not the way it works, because if Congress holds the purse strings, we don't have to give them anything if we don't want to. It's really up to us to make that choice as conservatives, but it's constantly frustrating to see this go on. And I know we can talk about the Republican candidates for president if you like, but we're not seeing someone step up there that really seems to energize this type of thinking either, and that's equally frustrating.
Right, exactly. And I was noticing that too. During this entire debate, we really didn't hear much out of Michelle Bachmann and Thad McCotter, who are members of the House and should, rightly be speaking out on this, and also as presidential candidates, you would think they would be stepping into the arena and making a splash in the media, trying to, give their 2 cents on what's going on, and we really didn't hear any of that, and that was kind of puzzling to me, but the thing about flexing the muscle that you have as well, it's kind of a, I guess it's kind of a sticky situation where, I'm not going to use a different term for sticky situation because then I'll have people trying to oust me like the congressman from Colorado. But, I think it's a sticky situation because there is this, as Andrew Klavan put it, I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, he calls it narrative hysteria. There's this narrative that, there's the storyline that must be followed, and no matter how crazy you look following that storyline, they're going to stick with it. They're going to stick with that narrative to the very end. And you saw the MSU media kind of following along every step of the way, playing up the exact narrative that the left wanted to get out there.
Yeah, and it's a shame that we have that inability to step up and say what needs to be said. I'm very frustrated with Romney. I'm undecided on this whole Republican candidate thing. I'm willing to let it play out, but I like some things about him. There's a lot I don't like about him. He's not nearly as conservative as I'd like him to see. But on this particular issue, I think Palin is certainly correct that he didn't step up and say much until after the fact. Now, I know it was difficult along the way. Things were changing back and forth. But where were the principles? Where was somebody willing to step up and say, here's a proposal to take? I mean, Connie Mack had an interesting proposal, the 1% proposal. Why don't somebody just come up and say that? Where were these guys running with the ideas? And that's the frustration. I think there was more of a defensive nature among many of them. They didn't want to get caught saying things that might be sound bites later, and instead they sat on the sidelines. And that's been the problem now. We have too many people on the sidelines.
Well, and that's the thing. We want to mock people for Monday morning quarterbacking, but then at the same time, if you're sitting on the sidelines during the debate, aren't you just as guilty as those who come out later and say, hey, this might not have been a good thing? Where were you during the debate, coming out and saying it before the vote happened, when your opinion actually mattered? And that's the frustrating thing. And again, Connie Mack, I applaud his plan because it makes sense. And you're talking about balancing the budget in 6 years. Yeah, you're not making a dent in the national debt, but at least you're keeping the national debt from building up any further after that 6 years.
Right, and I think it's unfortunately we have to agree that the debt's gotten to the point we just can't pay it off overnight. It's not going to happen, but we need to get to a point where we can again hit a balanced budget and make those interest payments so that we're at least at that level. Then as the economy grows over time, we can get some control over it. But that's a long-term proposition. Certainly 6 to 7 years seems to be about right. And the thing about his approach is it starts now. It doesn't say, okay, we're going to keep everything as it is for the next 3 years, and then we're going to start in year 4 and year 5 and year 6. There's no 10-year plan where you're not really cutting much now and all these great cuts are going to come later that some future Congress is going to ignore anyway. His plan was we're getting started today. And I think that's, as far as the principles of dealing with this, and I think this is where Boehner dropped the ball and where certainly any of the presidential candidates in the pack could have stepped up and said, all right, these are the 3 or 4 things we need to accomplish from this deal. Number 1, the only cuts we consider are the ones we control now. Number 2, we're not going to have committees because we've already had enough committees, and we all know how to deal with these entitlements. We have to have the guts to deal with it now. Number 3, there will be no new taxes. And just set those principles out and move forward. Instead, we had all this negotiation issue that back and forth. I was disappointed with the way the process occurred. And, at some point, the Republicans are going to have such a revolt within that you're going to see a third party. You might see the Libertarians pick up, but you may just see a third party. And that may hurt in the short run, but it may be what's necessary to revive and hold the feet to the fire of some people who claim to be conservatives but really don't toe the line when push comes to shove. The Lindsey Grahams and folks like that come to mind.
Exactly. And actually Lindsey Graham actually voted the right way this time, which is shocking. Maybe, we have a skit that we play here on the CB Media Network. It's from our sponsor, Wacko Toys, and it's the Lindsey Graham boomerang. And it's, you lob it to the right, and, it comes back every 6 years. But, you throw it kind of to the right, and it veers off to the left, and then just before election time, it kind of circles back around to the right and comes back to you. It's the weirdest thing, but it's a funny little skit. But it's damn if it isn't true. So maybe this is the, 3-year, 4-year mark in his, in his term, and he's starting to make that little switch and come back to the right just in time for election.
Well, he gets it right once in a while, and also sometimes he gets it right when his vote doesn't matter either. He's not very vocal on a key issue, but then when the issue comes down for a vote, he throws his vote on the correct side. But where was he during the fight?
Right.
And that's where you compare him to DeMint in South Carolina. DeMint is willing to not only vote the right way, he's also willing to step up and lead. And there's a presidential candidate or VP candidate right there, someone who's really willing to say the right thing, do the right thing, and he's not abrasive. He's willing to negotiate, but he's got principles he sticks to. He's kind of guy I'd like to see to step up.
Absolutely. I've been waiting for him to step into the race. I've been a huge fan of Jim DeMint for years. Back when he was in Congress, he actually lost an election because of his support for the fair tax, and he was being attacked on it, and he didn't back down from it. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, he's got all of my respect, and he's one of those handful right now. Maybe a Chris Christie and some others you might see as potentially stepping up. Who knows? Maybe Governor Perry out of Texas might be able to put something together. But clearly, we need some leadership in the Republican Party, and there's some potential there, but it's just not materializing yet.
Well, and the good thing is we do have a pretty deep bench. I mean, we've got a good farm team with people like Rubio and Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania. I mean, we've got a lot of great senators there. We've got a lot of great people in the House too that could be possible contenders later on. I'm not ready to jump on the draft West bandwagon or the draft Rubio bandwagon because 2012 is just way too soon for them. But it's good to know that they're in our corner, and we possibly have a chance to get one of them in as VP, or at least maybe get Alan West into the Senate for a future run, something along those lines. But it's good to see that we have a good bench, and not to knock Herman Cain. I see he's catching a lot of heat right now. I've been a Cain supporter since he announced, and because I love the guy. His grasp of economics is uncanny, and it's the best in the field right now.
Right.
But he's taken some heat for his comments on Islam, and then which he shouldn't have stuck his foot into to begin with, and then now kind of backing off of those comments, and now he's taking heat for backing off. He can't win for losing, but at the same time, I'm hoping this represents maybe a turn back towards what's really important right now, which is the economic issues, in which case, he can really score some points and increase his stock in the GOP primary.
Well, Cain calls it like he sees it, and that's refreshing. I'm personally willing to forgive a candidate for getting his foot in his mouth once in a while, or whatever. If he's in the ball game and making plays, I mean, if you use the football analogy, you're throwing the ball out downfield, once in a while it gets picked off, and I'm okay with that. But you're moving the ball. If you just want to hand the ball off every time and gain 2 or 3 yards and punt, well, okay, you didn't turn the ball over, but you didn't score either. And I think we have too many politicians that are more content with that type of strategy, and we need a more aggressive strategy. We need someone who's willing to step out and call things like they see them, and sometimes back up and say, okay, what I said yesterday, maybe I went a little too far. I think the American people accept that. I think they understand, hey, that normal people in talking about issues get passionate sometimes, and they have to rethink things, and that's okay. But if they're in the ball game, and they're moving the football, then we're okay with that. And I think that's the attractiveness to Cain, that he is one of the few that's willing to really step up and make a stand, and that's what so many conservatives are thriving for right now.
Right, exactly. You know, and that's the thing. He's not afraid to make a tough call either.